They laughed when she walked into the room until the man they all respected stood up for her. I stood in front of the mirror, tugging at the hem of my simple navy dress. It fell just below my knees, neat, modest, a little plain. The bathroom light flickered, throwing uneven shadows across my face, each one deepening the worry lines I'd earned over the last 6 years. "You look like a princess, Mommy." Her tiny voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to see Laya standing in the doorway, clutching her stuffed cat Mr. Whiskers against her chest. Her brown eyes sparkled with innocence and admiration. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said softly. She beamed as I fastened the small pearl necklace around my neck, the one she'd picked out earlier. It was the same necklace my mom had given me for my 16th birthday, back when I was still the daughter they believed in. The one with potential. I practiced a smile in the mirror. It didn't quite reach my eyes. 6 years as a night shift nurse had taught me how to fake alertness. At 4 in the morning, surely I could fake confidence for one dinner. Laya fidgeted with her yellow sundress, the one we'd found at the church thrift store last month. "Will Aunt Savannah be happy to see us this time?" she asked, her voice hesitant. My chest tightened. Even at 6 years old, she noticed more than I wanted her to. "Of course she will, honey." The lie was bitter on my tongue. The Italian restaurant loomed ahead like some kind of fortress, stone walls, golden lighting, valet attendants darting between gleaming cars. My little sedan, with its dented door and worn paint, looked painfully out of place among the polished BMWs and Mercedes. Laya pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass. "It's so fancy." "Yes, it is," I murmured, checking my lipstick in the rearview mirror. "Remember what we talked about? Best manners tonight." "Yes, ma'am." She nodded solemnly. "I'll be extra good." "Hey, mas des for 200. Inside, the hostess greeted us with a bright but practiced smile. Her gaze flickered, taking in my simple dress, Laya's second-hand shoes before settling into polite neutrality. "Torres anniversary party," I said, straightening my posture. "Of course," she replied smoothly, consulting her tablet. "Right this way." We followed her past tables filled with well-dressed couples and soft candlelight. At the back of the room, beneath a chandelier, stretched a long table filled with my family. Savannah and Ethan sat at the center like royalty. My sister's blonde highlights shimmered under the light, diamond earrings winking with every tilt of her head. Beside her, Ethan looked handsome in his tailored suit, his expression kind, genuine. The contrast between them was almost poetic. The hostess seated Laya and me at the far end of the table, near the kitchen doors that swung open every few minutes, letting bursts of heat and noise escape. "Mom," Laya whispered, eyes wide as she studied the array of silverware. "Why are there so many forks?" I smiled faintly. "Just follow my lead, honey." Mom spotted us first. Her heels clicked sharply as she crossed the room, perfume trailing like expensive mist. "You actually look presentable tonight," she whispered, smoothing down my collar as if I were still 12. "Thanks, Mom." Dad gave a distracted wave from across the table, barely glancing at me before turning back to his conversation with Ethan's father. Then Savannah approached perfectly composed, champagne flute in hand, red dress hugging her like it was designed for her alone. "Well, look who finally made it," she said brightly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And with her, little plus one." Laya frowned. "Hi, Aunt Savannah. Happy anniversary." Savannah smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "You've gotten so big," she said, patting Laya's head like she was a pet. "Hi, Savannah," I said evenly, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "Congratulations. The Preisen min self-frentes, and Risenin, and we relation from his redder." Ethan appeared then, and for the first time that evening, I felt genuine warmth. "Danica, good to see you," he said, giving me a brief hug. "And Miss Laya, I hear you started kindergarten this year." Laya's eyes lit up. "I can write my whole name now," he smiled. "I bet you can." As Savannah drifted away, Ethan stayed and kept talking to my daughter. Something about his quiet kindness hit me right in the chest. The evening blurred into toasts and small talk. Glasses clinked. Laughter rolled down the table. Someone proposed a toast to 3 wonderful years of Savannah and Ethan's marriage. Ethan stood, his cheeks flushed with pride. "And to our company's newest contract, $5 million. Applause erupted. Everyone raised their glasses. I clapped too, quietly but sincerely. 2 years ago, Ethan had called me in tears after losing his job. I'd stayed up after a 12-hour shift, helping him fix his resume, and connecting him with a manager I knew. Seeing him now successful, confident brought me real happiness. Then Savannah rose for her toast. "To my incredible husband," she began, smiling sweetly. "And to many more years of success." Her gaze slid toward me. "I just hope I never end up like some people over 30, single, and barely scraping by." The table laughed. My father chuckled louder than anyone. "Men don't want women with kids already," he added. Sweetheart, you dodged that bullet. The words hit me like a slap. My throat burned. I stared at my plate, trying to steady my breath. Then, Mom, Laya whispered, her voice trembling. Why are they laughing at you? The table went quiet. My heart stopped. Before I could answer, a chair scraped loudly across the floor. Ethan stood. That wasn't a joke, he said, his voice cutting through the silence. That was cruel. Every head turned. Savannah blinked in disbelief. Ethan, what are you doing? She hissed. He ignored her. 2 years ago, when I hit rock bottom, do you know who helped me? He looked straight at her. Not my family. Not my friends. Danica. The name echoed like a ripple across the table. I froze, caught between shock and humiliation. Ethan continued, his voice steady, strong. When I lost my job after the merger, Danica was the only person who checked in. She rewrote my resume at 3 a.m. after her shift. She introduced me to Mark Kelly, who gave me my first contract. I remembered that night Ethan's voice breaking on the phone, Savannah brushing him off. As Ethan spoke, something shifted inside me. For years, he said, I believed my wife's version of success was the only one that mattered. But tonight, I want to set the record straight. The strongest and kindest person at this table isn't the one wearing the most expensive jewelry. It's Danica. His words hung in the air, and for once, no one dared to speak. Savannah's face turned crimson. Ethan, this is ridiculous. No. He cut in. It's the truth. He turned back to the table. While I was lost, she was raising her daughter alone, working nights, cutting coupons just to get by. And she still found time to help me, without asking for anything in return. A murmur spread around the table. Aunt Cheryl's voice broke through. He's right. When I was going through chemo, Danica was the only one who drove me to treatments. Anyone sorrow anyway quick to riv quarters. Thank you Res Manor. Thank you N Hasmars. Then Uncle Frank chimed in. She helped my Robbie with his nursing school application. More stories followed, small acts of kindness I had long forgotten. Laya looked up at me, smiling. Mom helps everybody. That's when something broke open in me. All those years of trying to earn their approval, sitting at this table, taking their judgments, believing their story that I was the family disappointment. But in that moment, I saw it clearly. I wasn't the failure. I was the one holding everyone together. Savannah's voice rose, sharp with desperation. Oh please, she's always been too sensitive. It's not my fault she makes questionable life choices. They are life to consider in people, in problem in dollars to the natin market it. No one laughed this time. Ethan's voice softened, but it carried power. You should have respect for her. She deserves it. Mom shifted awkwardly. Dad stared into his glass. Memories flashed the graduation party Savannah had with a live band and caterers, while mine was a cheap dinner at Olive Garden. The $30,000 they gave her for her wedding, versus the congratulations card I got when Laya was born. I had spent years begging crumbs of affection from people who never planned to give them. I finally understood my worth was never theirs to define. I stood up. The chair legs scraped softly against the carpet. Thank you, Ethan, I said, my voice calm but steady. Then I looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. I've spent years trying to earn your respect. Tonight, I realized I don't need it anymore. Laya slipped her small hand into mine. Ready to go home, Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. She turned to the table, smiled politely. Thank you for inviting us. The bread was really good. A few nervous chuckles scattered through the room. We walked out, our reflections trailing across the polished floor, just a woman and her daughter, finally walking toward peace. Outside, the night air felt different. Lighter. As I helped Laya into the car, she asked quietly, Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? Thank you for watching with Danning. No honey, I said gently, starting the engine. Sometimes families just forget how to treat people with respect. She thought about it for a while, then whispered, I think you deserve lots of respect, Mommy. My throat tightened. Thank you, baby, I said, blinking back tears. So do you. As we drove away, I realized, for the first time in years, I didn't feel small anymore. The drive home that night was quiet, except for the hum of the old engine, and the soft breathing of my daughter in the back seat. Every streetlight we passed flickered across her small, sleepy face, painting her features with alternating shadows and gold. When we reached our apartment, I carried her inside, her little arms looping instinctively around my neck. I tucked her into bed, brushed a stray curl from her forehead, and just looked at her. The world could think what it wanted of me, but in her eyes, I was still everything. After she drifted off, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by a sea of bills, spread out like battle plans. A late electric notice lay at the top of the pile, the red ink shouting louder than any insult from that dinner. I let the tears fall quietly, freely for exactly 5 minutes. Then I wiped them away with a paper towel, took a deep breath, and grabbed a pen. There was still enough in my account to cover the electric bill. If I put off buying new shoes until next month, we'd be okay. Barely, but okay. I wasn't a failure. I was surviving. And that, in itself, was a kind of strength. Morning brought its usual chaos: alarms, uniforms, cereal spilled on the floor. As I packed Laya's lunch, my phone buzzed with messages. 3 missed calls from Mom. 1 text from Dad. Call your mother. Then Savannah's message popped up. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. Ethan was completely out of line. I stared at the screen for a long moment before hitting delete. Some things didn't need a reply. Later, as I dropped Laya off at Mrs. Winters before heading to my shift, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Aunt Cheryl. You showed real class, dear. Always knew you had your grandmother's backbone. That one made me smile. At the hospital, the rhythm of the night shift wrapped around me like a familiar song: beeping monitors, the squeak of gurney wheels, the quiet hum of whispered check-ins at 3 a.m. But something felt different inside me. I stood a little taller. Spoke with a little more certainty. Danica, my supervisor Martha said 3 weeks later, as we shared coffee in the break room. You seem different lately. More confident. I shrugged. But she was right. I'm applying for the night shift supervisor position, I said casually, surprising even myself. Martha's brows lifted. Then she smiled. About time. I'll put in a good word. That small step changed everything. Suddenly, my coworkers, the same ones who used to avoid extra shifts, were stopping by to help. Ellen from pediatrics offered to review my resume. James from the ER recommended a few leadership books that helped him when he got promoted. Their faith in me felt foreign but deeply healing. And at home, Laya was thriving too. One day, her kindergarten teacher sent home a note. Laya shows exceptional empathy and leadership with her classmates. Anjo leiter way. She'd drawn a picture labeled, My Family. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands under a bright yellow sundae. That's us, she said proudly. Yes, baby, I whispered. Just us. I taped the drawing to the fridge, right beside a glass jar labeled, New Beginning Fund. It was half filled with coins and crumpled dollar bills, our little symbol of hope. We made rituals out of small things. Tuesday nights became homemade pizza nights, with dough rising on the counter while Laya did her homework. Saturday mornings were for sidewalk chalk masterpieces outside our building. Each small joy was like a stitch, mending something inside me. 3 months later, Martha called me into her office. Her expression was unreadable. The administration reviewed all the applications for night shift supervisor, she began, flipping through a folder. My pulse quickened. Then she looked up. And they've decided to offer you the position. Congratulations, Danica. For a second, I couldn't move. When I finally managed to breathe, I said, thank you. That evening, my coworkers surprised me with a small cake in the break room. To Nurse Torres, Ellen said, raising her paper cup of sparkling cider. Our new night supervisor. The applause, the laughter, it all felt surreal. At home, I opened my laptop, staring at the bookmarked department listings I'd been too afraid to inquire about before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What are you doing, Mommy? Laya asked, peering over my shoulder. Maybe looking for a new place for us to live, I said. Can I have yellow walls, like sunshine? I smiled. Maybe we can, baby. Maybe we can. I hit send inquiry. It was a small action, but it felt like reclaiming my life. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. Mom's number. I froze, thumb hovering above the screen. The last time we'd spoken was that disastrous dinner. Hello? Danica. Mom's voice sounded softer. Older. Maybe. Your father and I miss Laya. We were thinking, maybe Sunday lunch? The invitation hung between us, heavy with unspoken things. We can visit for an hour, I said slowly. But I need to know we'll be treated with respect. Silence stretched on the line. Finally, she sighed. Yes, of course. 1 o'clock. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, the weight of the moment sinking in. Setting boundaries with your parents felt both terrifying and liberating. That afternoon, I met my friend Sarah, another nurse, another single mom. You did what most of us are too scared to do, she said, sipping her coffee as our daughters played nearby. I'm terrified, I admitted. Part of me still wants their approval. She smiled knowingly. That part never completely goes away. But you're teaching Laya something powerful: that respect starts with how we demand to be treated. Her words stayed with me. At work, my first weeks as supervisor were intense, constant schedule adjustments, staff shortages, paperwork. But I started noticing things others didn't. One night, a new nurse named Rachel approached me nervously. My son has therapy twice a week, she said quietly. Would it be possible to adjust my schedule? This was no day on. I thought of all the nights I'd begged for understanding when Laya was sick and no one listened. Of course, I said. We'll make it work. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. My last supervisor made me feel like my son was an inconvenience. Your son is the reason you work so hard, I said softly. Never apologize for being a good mother. She smiled through her tears. You have no idea how much that means. Actually, I did. With my first supervisor paycheck, I enrolled Laya in piano lessons at the community center. We found a second-hand keyboard at a thrift shop. It was scratched, one leg slightly uneven, but it played beautifully. It's not perfect, I warned. Laya pressed a key, smiling as a clear note filled the air. It's beautiful, she whispered. And just like that, I saw our whole journey in that sound, imperfect, but beautiful all the same. 6 months after that dinner, 6 months after my family's laughter turned into silence, we moved into our new apartment. The walls were freshly painted. The kitchen had countertops without cracks. The bathroom faucet didn't leak, and in the bedroom, Laya gasped. You painted it yellow. I did, I said smiling. While you were at Sarah's. She ran around, twirling under the light streaming through the window. It looks like sunshine, Mommy. That night, as she practiced her first piano scale, I hung our few family photos, her school picture, a candid shot from the park, the Polaroid from the day she was born. No fancy portraits. No extended family smiling for appearances, just us. And it was enough. The soft melody of Laya's music filled the apartment. I sat by the window, watching her small fingers dance across the keys, and realized something profound. We had built this life. One small, stubborn act of hope at a time. And finally, I could breathe. At work, things kept improving. My shifts ran smoother. The staff felt happier. You're actually doing it, Sarah said one afternoon as we reviewed the new schedule. The rotation everyone said was impossible, you fixed it. The new plan gave every parent at least 3 nights a week at home and 1 weekend off per month. When the hospital administrator, Mr. Stevens, called me into his office, my heart pounded. Your new rotation system has reduced turnover by 15%, he said, looking impressed. The board wants to implement it hospital-wide. My breath caught. Thank you, sir. Credit where it's due, he said, handing me the signed approval. Then he added with a rare smile, you should think about your MSN. We have scholarship options. It is ape the warden, not the product, expansive said. I walked out of his office on air. It was the first time in years someone in authority saw my worth and said it out loud. That afternoon, as I adjusted the schedule board, Ethan's familiar voice called from the hallway. He wasn't alone. Beside him stood a man I didn't recognize, tall, kind eyes, salt and pepper hair, a rolled set of blueprints under his arm. Danica, Ethan said warmly. Meet David Whitman, he owns Whitman Paint and Supply. David. This is Danica Torres, nursing supervisor. And the reason I'm still in business. David extended a hand, his palm warm and calloused. Ethan speaks very highly of you. Says you're the most capable person he knows. Heat rose to my cheeks. He exaggerates. David smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. I doubt that. Ethan grinned like a teenager about to meddle. David's a widower. His son's 14. Oh. And Danica's daughter just started piano lessons. I gave him a look that said stop talking. David chuckled softly. Maybe our kids could meet sometime. James plays guitar loudly. And just like that, something gentle sparked between us. Would you like to grab coffee sometime? David asked, voice calm, polite, but sincere. To discuss the project, of course. Before I could answer, Ethan chimed in. She's free Thursday afternoon. Their same day of Collins. I shot him a glare. Thursday's fine, I said anyway. As they walked away, Ethan turned and gave me a thumbs up. I couldn't help laughing. Thursday came faster than I expected, and with it came something I hadn't felt in a long time, nervous anticipation. It was ridiculous, really. It was just coffee. A simple meeting to discuss the project. That's what I kept telling myself, as I checked my lipstick for the 3rd time in the hospital restroom mirror. Marissa, one of the nurses, leaned against the doorframe with a grin. Girl, you've checked that lipstick so many times it's about to file for overtime. I rolled my eyes, laughing. It's not a date. Uh-huh, she said, smirking. That's why you're wearing your good jeans and mascara. Totally professional. I tried not to smile. It's coffee, Marissa. For the pediatric wing project. Sure, she said, winking. Just remember to smile with your eyes. Supervisor Torres. I left the break room shaking my head. But secretly, she wasn't wrong. The cafe was small but bright, warm lights, soft music, the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and second chances. David was already there, reading a newspaper folded neatly beside his coffee cup. When he looked up and saw me, His face broke into a genuine, relaxed smile, the kind that reached his eyes. I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, he said, standing as I approached. So I waited. Black, 1 sugar, I said. You were smart to wait. I can be picky. He chuckled. Good to know. It was the kind of laughter that didn't demand anything, no performance, no pretense. Just easy. Our conversation began with the project hospital paint colors, safety coatings, antimicrobial finishes, but somewhere between warm tones promote healing, and budget constraints on low VOC paints. We stopped talking about work. He told me about his late wife Lisa. She'd passed away from cancer 4 years ago. His voice softened when he said her name, his thumb tracing the rim of his coffee cup. The hardest part, he admitted, was figuring out how to be both parents. James needed his mother's gentleness, and I only knew how to be his father. I nodded. I know what that's like. Laya's dad left when I was 5 months pregnant. He's in Seattle now with a new family. I'm sorry, David said quietly. I smiled faintly. Don't be. I used to think I couldn't handle everything on my own. Turns out I can. He tilted his head, studying me for a moment. You've had to be strong for a long time, haven't you? I didn't have a choice. He didn't offer pity. He didn't say you're so brave or that must have been hard. Instead he just nodded. I get it. Even so fidem dale and subject found, and applies with another to alle. Somehow, that simple phrase meant more than any sympathy ever could. When we finally parted ways, he walked me to my car. The late afternoon sun slanted across the parking lot, golden and gentle. I'd like to see you again, he said, his tone calm but sincere. Maybe dinner next time. I felt my heart stumble over itself. I'd like that too, I said, and meant it. Sunday came with familiar nerves, as Laya and I pulled into my parents' driveway for lunch. Their modest brick house looked exactly the same, roses blooming along the walkway, the same white curtains in the windows. But stepping up to that door felt different this time. Dad opened it before I could knock, his expression softened at the sight of Laya. Hi, Grandpa, she squealed, throwing her arms around him. He chuckled, patting her back awkwardly. Hey kiddo. Then to me. How's the new position treating you? It was small talk, but it was something. It's good, I said. Busy, but good. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. I always knew you'd make supervisor someday, she said, as if she hadn't doubted every decision I'd made up to that point. I didn't correct her. I just smiled politely. We set the table together while Leia practiced a simple song from her music book, the one Savannah had sent her after running into us at the grocery store. Her tiny hands pressed the keys carefully, tongue poking out in concentration. When she finished, the room filled with hesitant applause. Lunch passed without tension. No barbed remarks, no comparisons. Just quiet conversation about gardens, school projects, and church bake sales. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it wasn't frost either. Something in between, like early spring. 9 months after that unforgettable dinner, laughter filled my apartment. Sarah chased her daughter Zoe through the living room, while Aunt Cheryl arranged cheese and crackers on the coffee table. My colleagues crowded the kitchen, arguing cheerfully about the hospital's new record system. The doorbell rang. They're here, Laya squealed, racing to answer it. David and his son James stood in the doorway, holding a potted plant and a plate of cookies. Sorry we're late, David said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. James insisted on baking these from scratch. James rolled his eyes, but he looked secretly proud. Inside, the energy was easy, warm. James immediately found Laya, showing her how to play a silly tune on the piano. Ladies and gentlemen, Laya announced with the confidence of a Broadway star. I will now perform my recital pieces. Everyone gathered around the second-hand upright piano as she played 3 simple songs. The final notes of Für Elise echoed softly through the room, and the applause that followed was genuine. David slipped an arm around my waist. She's remarkable, he murmured. Just like her mother. I smiled, watching my daughter's bright face. Around us stood my chosen family: Sarah, Aunt Cheryl, my co-workers, David, and James. No judgment, no comparison, no hierarchy. Just love, respect, and belonging. And for the first time in my life, that word family felt right. A week later, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. The gold-embossed letters made my stomach tighten instantly. Savannah and Ethan Pitt, celebrating 4 years of marriage. Same restaurant. Same time. Same family. Laya found the card as she unpacked her backpack. What's that, Mummy? An invitation, I said quietly. To another fancy dinner? Yes, sweetheart. Are we going? I hesitated. I don't know yet. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat on the couch staring at the invitation. Memories came flooding back. The laughter, the humiliation, the way Ethan's voice had saved me when I couldn't speak for myself. I picked up the phone. Ethan, I said when he answered. About the invitation. I was hoping you'd call, he said gently. Things are different now, Danica. Savannah's been seeing a therapist. She's been changing. I wanted to believe him. I appreciate that. But I need to protect Laya. I won't put her through another night like that. I understand, he said quietly. The next evening, David and I walked through the park near my apartment. Laya ran ahead toward the swings, her laughter carrying through the twilight. What are you afraid will happen if you go? He asked. That nothing's changed, I said honestly. That they'll just find new ways to make me feel small. Then save a bill. He nodded, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. You've grown stronger, Danica. You can handle this on your terms. Something in his calm certainty steadied me. That night, I picked up my phone again, this time to call Savannah directly. Before I could lose my nerve, I said, if I agree to come, I need to know what to expect. There was a pause on the other end. Then she said quietly, I'd like us to try again. I've been working on myself. Her voice trembled in a way I'd never heard before, vulnerable, uncertain. Okay, I said finally. We'll come. Saturday arrived with butterflies. Laya twirled in front of the mirror in her new purple dress, embroidered with tiny flowers. This one, please, Mommy. It's perfect, I said, checking the price tag. Grateful I could say yes without hesitation now. For myself, I chose a simple emerald dress. The color caught the light just enough to make me feel seen but not showy. As I curled Laya's hair, she asked, Mommy, what's forgiveness? I paused, the curling iron mid-air. It's when someone hurts you, but you give them another chance, I said slowly. If they're truly sorry. She thought for a moment. But not always, right? I smiled. No, baby. Not always. I kissed her forehead. We're going to see if Aunt Savannah and Grandma and Grandpa are ready for their second chance. David picked us up at 6:30, his eyes lighting up when he saw us. You two look beautiful, he said, helping Laya into his car. Text me if you want me to come get you earlier, okay? I nodded. Thank you, David. The drive to the restaurant felt surreal, familiar roads, same golden glow of streetlights, but this time, my chest wasn't tight. This time, I wasn't walking into that room to beg for belonging. I was walking in as the woman I'd become. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same stone facade. Same golden lighting that made everything look like a movie scene. Same valet attendants darting between polished cars. But I had changed. This time, I walked through those glass doors with my head held high. Laya's small hand nestled confidently in mine. The hostess greeted us with a warm smile that held none of the judgment I remembered. Good evening, she said. The Torres party is expecting you. Before she could lead us to the table, Savannah appeared. She wasn't dressed like the Savannah I remembered. No sequin gown, no dramatic hair, no diamond chandelier earrings. Instead, she wore a simple black dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a low twist. Her eyes flickered nervously when she saw me. You came, she said quietly. Thank you. There was no mockery in her tone this time. Just gratitude. She looked down at Laya and smiled genuinely. This time. Your dress is so pretty. There's a special kids' table tonight with your cousins. Would you like to join them? Laya glanced up at me for permission. Go ahead, honey. As she skipped away, I turned back to Savannah. Her hands trembled slightly, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. It was strange seeing her like this, uncertain. Human. Let's go sit, she said softly. The main table was arranged differently this year. No more being exiled near the kitchen doors. My name card was placed near the center. Mom stood up when she saw me. Her embrace was awkward, but genuine. You look lovely, Danica, she said. There was no bite in her tone this time. Dad cleared his throat. Good to see you both made it. Ethan smiled, pulling out my chair. I'm glad you're here. As I sat down, I caught the faintest breath of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for impact. Dinner began with polite conversation. The atmosphere was strangely calm. When I mentioned my promotion, Mom actually leaned in. So, what does a night supervisor do exactly? And this week's of Waitian and the Canners to this Fielders. This week not of Midas again. I blinked, caught off guard. Mostly scheduling, oversight, ensuring patient care continuity. That sounds like a lot of responsibility, Dad interrupted, not unkindly. I'm proud of you. It was simple, understated, but it meant more than any extravagant praise. I felt something in my chest loosen. When dessert plates were cleared, Savannah rose with her champagne flute. Last year, that motion had sent my stomach into knots. This year, I forced myself to breathe. This year has taught me a lot about what matters, she began, her voice calm but trembling slightly. Her gaze swept the table, landing on me. Some people show strength in ways we don't always recognize. Her eyes glistened, and though she didn't say my name, everyone knew who she meant. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was reflective. Then Ethan stood, lifting his glass. "I'd like to echo that," he said warmly. "My company's grown a lot this year, and I owe much of that to the people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." His gaze found mine, a silent acknowledgement of the night that had started it all. Later, as I stood at the dessert table choosing between strawberry tart and tiramisu, Mom appeared beside me. We both reached for the same plate and froze, our hands almost touching. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, arranging strawberries with unnecessary precision. "We didn't see you clearly." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The words I'd waited my whole life to hear were being whispered beside a chocolate fountain. "I needed your support, not your judgment," I said finally, my voice low but steady. She nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. Dad joined us, hands tucked awkwardly in his pockets. Your mother's right. We favored Savannah. Always have." There was no excuse, no justification, just truth, heavy and overdue. I looked at them both. Their faces, older now, worn by time and mistakes, seemed softer. "Well," I said after a pause, "we'll see where we go from here." And somehow, that felt like enough. As the evening wound down, Savannah approached me again. "Can we talk outside?" We stepped onto the stone patio, the night air cool against my skin. The city buzzed faintly beyond the hedges. Savannah crossed her arms, then uncrossed them again, clearly searching for words. "I was so jealous of you," she said suddenly. I blinked. "Jealous? Of me?" She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "You've always known who you are. You don't pretend. You make hard choices, and stand by them. I couldn't do that. So I made fun of you instead." The confession stunned me. For years, I'd seen her as untouchable, the perfect sister, the golden child. She swallowed hard. "Ethan and I have been trying for a baby for 3 years. Nothing's worked. The treatments are killing me. And last summer, we almost didn't make it." Her voice cracked. "I kept posting perfect pictures because I couldn't face the truth. I was breaking." My heart softened. All those perfect social media posts, the flawless dinners they had, been armor. Just like my fake smiles had once been. "Savannah," I began, unsure what to say. "Maybe we can start again," she whispered. "Not as rivals. As sisters. And acceptance all to directives." I hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'd like that." She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around me. I let her. I didn't fully sink into the hug, but I didn't pull away either. It was a beginning. Before we left, the family gathered for a photo. For the first time, I wasn't pushed to the edge of the frame. I stood beside Savannah, Laya beaming between her grandparents, her smile pure and wide. When David arrived to pick us up, I introduced him to everyone. Savannah asked about his business with genuine interest, and even Mom looked pleased to meet him. Ethan gave me a knowing smile, the same warm pride that had once helped me stand taller in a room full of silence. In the car, Laya fell asleep almost instantly, her purple dress rumpled, a faint smudge of chocolate on her chin. David glanced at me as we pulled away. "How was it?" I looked out the window, the restaurant lights fading into the night. "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past," I said quietly. "It just makes space for a different future." He reached over and took my hand, his thumb brushing gently across my knuckles. "And how does that future look tonight?" I smiled faintly. Eyes still on the road ahead. "Like peace," I said. "Like finally breathing again." 2 years later, I stood in my garden. The late afternoon sun warming my shoulders. Clay pots of basil and rosemary lined the windowsill, their scent sweet and earthy. Through the open window drifted the sound of Laya's piano, a simple, beautiful version of Ode to Joy that James had taught her. Inside, the walls were filled with framed photos. Laya feeding ducks with Mom and Dad at the park. Savannah and me laughing over coffee. David and me at the hospital fundraiser, his hand resting easily at my waist. The family we once were had become something new, imperfect, but whole. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "How did the presentation go?" I smiled. Earlier that day, I'd spoken to a support group for single mothers at the community center. I'd told them what I'd learned the hard way, that your worth isn't defined by who fails to see it. It's revealed in how you rise when they try to diminish you. 20 women had listened, eyes tired but bright, as I shared my story from that humiliating dinner to this garden filled with laughter. A silver sedan pulled into the driveway, David's car. He stepped out, holding takeout containers and a worn gardening book. "Thai food as requested," he said, grinning. "And I found that book you wanted." I met him halfway, taking both the food and the quick kiss he offered. Inside, we set the table together. The rhythm of our shared life as natural as breathing. He leaned against the counter watching me. "So, have you thought about my proposal?" A week earlier, he'd knelt on our porch and asked me to marry him. I'd told him I needed time, not out of fear, but to truly savor the decision. I have, I said now, smiling softly. And yes, on one condition. Name it. Laya gets to help plan the wedding. His laughter filled the kitchen. Wouldn't have it any other way. It'd fidens 4 menor. And they take of the restaurant proximal. Later that night, as twilight turned the sky soft purple, Laya's music floated through the house. My phone buzzed again. A text from Savannah. Still on for Saturday's appointment at the adoption agency? After years of painful treatments, she and Ethan had chosen a new path to build their family. When she asked me to come along for support, I knew it wasn't just about the appointment. It was about the bridge we'd finally built. As dusk settled, I stepped into the garden again. Fireflies blinked between the rose bushes. Inside, laughter and music mingled. Laya at the piano, David setting the table, the sound of a home filled with love. Sometimes the greatest redemption isn't revenge or recognition, it's finding peace. The road from that restaurant to this garden hadn't been straight or easy. But every heartbreak, every humiliation, every small victory had led me here to a life that was finally, truly mine. Your worth isn't determined by those who cannot see it clearly. It's revealed in how you rise, every single time they try to make you small. And in that truth, I had finally found my joy. The morning sun spilled into the kitchen, golden and warm, illuminating the soft rhythm of an ordinary miracle, our life. David hummed quietly as he packed leftovers into containers. Laya sat at the table, swinging her legs while working on her piano theory homework. Her pencil tapped in rhythm with the melody still lingering from last night's practice. I stood by the window, watering the small herb garden we'd started together. Basil, rosemary, mint, and one stubborn tomato plant that refused to die no matter how many times I forgot to water it. This was peace, but more than that, it was purpose. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving each day, I was shaping what came next. After that evening at the restaurant, everything changed. Slowly and quietly. The Sunday lunches at my parents' house had become routine again. But not the same kind of tense, tiptoeing routine they used to be. Now, Mom asked about my work, and she actually listened. Dad still complained about his aching knees and the price of gas. But every so often, I'd catch him smiling proudly when Laya played piano after lunch. And Savannah, she'd softened. Sometimes, she'd send me little texts like, "Can you look over this speech I'm writing for the foundation dinner? I found a new book on women in healthcare leadership, thought of you." It's not go did. It was strange at first, seeing her reach out not from pride, but from sincerity. I never thought we'd be here. But that's the thing about growth, it rarely announces itself with trumpets. It creeps in quietly, turning wounds into roots. One Saturday, I sat at my desk preparing my notes for another talk at the community center. The small group I'd started for single mothers had doubled in size. We called it Second Sunrise. Every meeting was the same beautiful blend of exhaustion and hope. Women sharing stories of eviction notices, custody battles, late-night shifts, and those small, defiant victories that only other mothers could understand. I wasn't a motivational speaker. I was just honest. I told them what no one had told me when I was struggling, that you can be broke and still be brave, that you can be tired and still be kind. That self-respect doesn't come from others, it's built one boundary, one no at a time. After every session, someone would stay behind. Last week, it was a woman named Rosa, who whispered, "I'm scared to leave him. I don't know how to start over." We sat for an hour, drawing out a plan, safe contacts, a shelter line, a small emergency fund. She hugged me before leaving and said, "You made me believe I can." I cried the moment she left. Because that was exactly what I had once needed someone to tell me. At work, things were evolving too. The Torres rotation system, the flexible schedule I'd designed, was now official hospital policy. I'd even been invited to present it at the regional nursing conference. Standing behind that podium, my hands shook. The lights were bright. The crowd, large administrators, hospital directors, other nurses from across the state. I took a deep breath and began. "Every name on a schedule is a life," I said. "Someone's parent, child, partner." We forget that when we build systems that value hours over humanity. The room went quiet. By the time I finished, I saw heads nodding, pens moving. Afterward, a senior director approached me. "Your perspective is rare, Nurse Torres. Have you considered leadership training? We'd sponsor it." For a moment, I was speechless. Then I smiled. "Thank you, I'll think about it." But deep down, I already knew my answer. I wanted to keep going. That night, when I got home, David was waiting on the porch. His sleeves rolled up, hair tousled from the wind. "How did it go?" he asked. "It went better than I ever imagined," I said, sinking into the porch chair beside him. He handed me a mug of tea. "I'm not surprised. You've been leading long before anyone gave you a title." Has the pastrance of the air. Not the come same. His words wrapped around me like warmth. Laya peeked out from the living room window, her hair in a messy bun, waving dramatically. Did mommy do amazing? David grinned. Of course she did. Can we celebrate? She asked. I laughed. How? She ran out, holding a tray with 3 scoops of ice cream each melting at different speeds. We'll have a fancy dessert like the restaurant. We sat there under the porch light, eating melting ice cream and laughing. It wasn't champagne or chandeliers, but it was the sweetest celebration I'd ever had. A few weeks later, Savannah called. Ethan and I are finalizing the adoption paperwork, she said. Would you come with us to meet the agency counselor? I could use your support. I hesitated for a moment, remembering all the nights I'd cried because of her words. But then I thought of what forgiveness really meant, not pretending it hadn't hurt, but choosing to move forward anyway. Of course, I said. I'd love to. The appointment was quiet but powerful. The counselor walked them through the process, and for the first time, I saw my sister not as the woman who had mocked me, but as someone learning how to love beyond herself. When we left, she turned to me. You were right that night. Strength doesn't always look like success. I smiled. And failure doesn't mean weakness. Hazy as they of coursed in ride. We hugged in the parking lot, sunlight catching in her tears. At home, Laya's life was blossoming too. She'd started performing small recitals at the community center. One afternoon, after she finished playing a gentle melody that made even the gruff janitor stop to listen, she whispered to me, Mommy, when I play, it feels like I can tell people I'm okay without using words. That was the moment I realized she'd healed too. All the late nights, the skipped meals, the tears, it had built her resilience, not her bitterness. And I made a quiet promise to myself. She would grow up knowing she was enough, no matter what anyone said. Months passed, and our little house began to feel more and more like a home that carried laughter instead of tension. David and James became fixtures in our lives. James helped Laya with her math homework, while David fixed the leaky faucet I'd been ignoring for months. Sometimes, I'd catch the 3 of them playing music together, David on guitar, James on drums, Laya on piano. The house vibrating with offbeat joy, and me? I'd just stand in the doorway, smiling like I'd finally found the rhythm of my own life. One evening, while folding laundry, my phone buzzed with a new message from the hospital board. Congratulations, Danica, you've been approved for the Nursing Leadership Scholarship. Program begins next month. I sat there, clothes forgotten in my lap, whispering to myself, you did it. Not for recognition. Not to prove anyone wrong. But because every step from that humiliating dinner to this moment had led me here. Later that night, after Laya had fallen asleep, I stepped out onto the porch. The garden shimmered under the moonlight, the herbs swaying gently in the breeze. David joined me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. You're thinking again? He teased softly. I'm thinking, I admitted, smiling. About how far we've come. There Fincherly taking might. He kissed the top of my head. You've built something incredible, Danica. Not just for you, for everyone around you. I leaned against him, letting the quiet fill the space between us. Maybe, I whispered. This is what success actually looks like. He smiled. Not maybe, definitely. And as the night deepened, I thought about everything. The pain, the humiliation, the rebuilding, the forgiveness, the love. All of it had shaped me into the woman I was now. Not perfect, not rich, but at peace. And that peace? It was worth everything. The first morning of the leadership program felt a lot like the first day of nursing school, exciting, terrifying, and full of coffee. The hospital had partnered with a nearby university to train future nursing directors. I sat in a bright lecture hall surrounded by other supervisors. Some older, some younger, all equally nervous. Welcome, the instructor said. You're not here just to manage. You're here to lead with empathy. That word empathy hit differently now. Years ago, I might have rolled my eyes, too tired from double shifts to think about leadership philosophies. But now, I understood it. Empathy wasn't soft. It was strength in disguise, because it takes courage to care when the world keeps telling you not to. At the hospital, balancing classes and the night shift wasn't easy. But for once, the exhaustion felt meaningful. One night, while reviewing charts at 2 a.m., I heard quiet sniffles from the break room. It was Rachel, the nurse whose schedule I'd adjusted months ago. Her hands trembled as she held a letter. Rachel? I asked gently. She looked up, eyes red. They're cutting hours next month. I can't afford daycare if they move me to part-time. I sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone in this. Let's see what we can do. That's done. By sunrise, I drafted a rotation proposal to redistribute hours across departments, so no one lost their benefits. I stayed late to present it to administration. By that afternoon, it was approved. When Rachel hugged me, whispering, You saved me. I just smiled and said, no. We saved each other. The new program brought other challenges too. I found myself in rooms where my voice didn't always fit. Meetings full of executives in expensive suits, discussing efficiency metrics like they weren't attached to human lives. One afternoon, during a particularly dry presentation, a senior administrator said, "We could reduce overtime by cutting night nurse coverage. Patients don't need full monitoring after midnight." I set down my pen. "With respect," I said, "you're not the one standing beside a patient's bed when their oxygen drops at 3 a.m. The room went silent. "Cutting corners doesn't save money," I continued. "It costs lives. We're here to heal, not to gamble." A long pause. Then the administrator nodded slowly. "Point taken, Nurse Torres." Afterward, one of the senior directors stopped me in the hallway. "That was brave," she said. I smiled. "No. That was necessary. And the cutting sector then tame. In market and another salve." At home, life was blooming in a different way. The wedding planning had officially begun thanks to Laya, our self-appointed creative director. She drew up design boards, made from construction paper, glitter glue, and magazine cutouts. "Okay," she said one evening, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "We'll have fairy lights, cupcakes, and a piano performance by me and James." David laughed. "You've got this all figured out, huh?" Laya nodded seriously. "Of course. It's your forever day." I couldn't help but smile at that. Forever day. I liked that better than wedding day. But not everyone was adjusting easily. One night, while washing dishes, Laya asked quietly, "Mommy, will you still have time for me after you marry David?" I dried my hands and knelt beside her. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "no matter what changes, you'll always be my first priority. You and I, this little team, we're forever." Her eyes filled with tears of relief. "Promise?" "Promise." That night, as she slept, I sat on the edge of her bed, thinking about all the promises I'd broken to myself over the years, the dreams I'd postponed, the hopes I'd buried under practicality, and now, one by one, I was keeping them again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind: hospital deadlines, evening classes, and wedding planning that somehow kept expanding despite my attempts at simplicity. One evening, I found myself standing in the middle of a bridal boutique, completely overwhelmed by lace, satin, and price tags that made my pulse spike. "This feels like too much," I murmured. Savannah, who'd insisted on coming with me, chuckled softly. "You always go for simple, don't you?" "Simple is safe," I said. She tilted her head. "Maybe this time, it's okay to go for something that feels special." Her tone wasn't teasing, it was gentle, almost protective. I exhaled. "Maybe. Fixos. 1. We found the dress almost by accident, a soft ivory gown with delicate sleeves and a skirt that moved like water when I turned. I stared at my reflection, barely recognizing the woman in the mirror, not because of the dress, but because of the peace in her eyes. Savannah smiled. "You look like you finally believe in yourself." Maybe, for the first time, I did. A week before the wedding, Mom called. "I've been thinking," she said, hesitating. "We'd like to host the rehearsal dinner. If that's okay with you." I paused, my heart catching on the edge of old memories. "That would be nice, Mom. Thank you." Her voice wavered slightly. "You deserve a good start, Danica." That single sentence undid me in the quietest way. For years, I'd craved those words, and hearing them now didn't erase the pain, but it made the healing feel complete. The night of the rehearsal, the house was full of warmth. Not the fake, polite kind, the real kind that comes from effort and apology. Mom had cooked her famous chicken piccata. Dad grilled vegetables outside. Savannah and Ethan arrived early to help set the table, their laughter easy, unguarded. When David walked in, Mom greeted him with a hug and said, "Welcome to the family, son." He looked startled, then touched. "Thank you, Mrs. Torres. They're safe with no marks. And pen and shade. Please," she said, smiling. "Call me Mom." Across the room, Savannah and I exchanged glances. For once, neither of us rolled our eyes. After dinner, Dad stood and cleared his throat. "I know I haven't always said it, but I'm proud of you, kiddo." I looked up, tears already threatening. "You've built a good life. One that matters." I couldn't speak, so I just nodded, my throat tight. Sometimes the simplest words carry the greatest weight. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in the backyard. Fairy lights twinkling in the dark. The air smelled faintly of lemon and rosemary. My wedding dress hung upstairs, ready for tomorrow. I heard the creak of the screen door and turned. David stepped out, 2 mugs of cocoa in hand. "You're still awake," he said softly. "Couldn't sleep." He handed me a mug. "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah." I smiled faintly. "It doesn't feel real." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, You've spent so long taking care of everyone else, Danica. It's okay to let someone take care of you now. Tears filled my eyes. You already do. He brushed a strand of hair from my face. Tomorrow's not about changing your life. It's about celebrating the one you built with your own hands. Intentions. And as the night stretched quiet and tender around us, I realized he was right. Tomorrow wouldn't be the start of a new life. It would be the continuation of a life I had finally learned to love. The morning of the wedding dawned with soft light and the sound of birds outside the window. It wasn't grand or cinematic, just peaceful. The kind of morning that felt like the universe was quietly smiling. Laya was the first to stir. She crept into my room wearing her flower girl dress over her pajamas, her hair sticking out in every direction. "Wake up, mommy," she whispered dramatically. "It's forever day," I laughed, pulling her into my arms. "Forever day, huh?" She nodded seriously. "You have to eat something, or you'll faint before you say I do." I smiled. "You sound like Aunt Savannah." She said it first. Of course she did. The house buzzed with gentle chaos. Mom and Savannah arrived early, each carrying a different kind of nervous energy. Savannah had organized the hair and makeup team, two women who moved through the house like calm professionals, setting up curling irons and brushes by the window. Mom busied herself with flowers, rearranging them at least 3 times before deciding they were perfect. "Remember when you said you'd never wear a white dress again?" she teased softly. I smiled. "Guess I changed my mind. There is neverly one, wherein said to give and cease." She adjusted the hem of my gown and took a step back. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." For a moment, her voice caught, and I saw tears well in her eyes. "I know I didn't always say it before, but I am so proud of the woman you've become." I blinked hard. "Thank you, Mom." The ceremony was simple, a garden behind our small church, sunlight filtering through the trees, chairs lined with wildflowers and ribbon. Laya stood proudly at the front, clutching her basket of petals, grinning from ear to ear. James, now 15 and taller than everyone, stood beside his dad as best man, trying his best to look serious, but failing every time Laya caught his eye. When the music began, I took my first step down the aisle. Every face I passed, my coworkers, the women from Second Sunrise, my parents, even old friends from nursing school, was smiling through tears. But my eyes were fixed on David. He wasn't the polished magazine perfect kind of groom. He was just real. The man who had walked beside me through every new chapter, who saw me not as something to fix but as someone worth standing with. And when I reached him, he whispered, "You made it." I whispered back, "We both did." "Hates." The officiant spoke briefly, but the words barely registered. All I could think about was the journey that had brought us here. Then it was time for our vows. David went first. His voice was steady, quiet. "I can't promise life will always be easy," he said, "but I promise you'll never walk through it alone again. You've built a world full of light, Danica, and I'm just grateful I get to live in it with you." Tears blurred my vision. When it was my turn, I took a breath, feeling every eye on me, and said, "For a long time, I thought love had to be earned, that I had to become smaller to deserve it. But you showed me that love isn't about worthiness, it's about kindness, about showing up. And that's what I promise to do for you. Every day." Even the officiant blinked back tears. When we exchanged rings, Laya whispered loudly from the front row, "Mommy, don't drop it." Everyone laughed. Even I couldn't stop giggling as David mouthed, "I've got it." And when he kissed me, it wasn't the kind of kiss you see in movies. It was gentle, familiar, a sealing of everything we'd already built. The reception was held right there in the garden, under strings of twinkling lights. There was no DJ, no grand buffet, just homemade food, laughter, and people who'd walked with us through every high and low. Ethan raised a glass first. "To Danica," he said, smiling proudly. "You taught all of us what real strength looks like." "And to David, welcome to the best kind of chaos." The crowd chuckled, clinking glasses. Savannah followed. She stood, holding her champagne flute, her voice trembling. "I once called my sister a failure. But today, I see what she really is, a survivor, a leader, and someone who never gave up on herself. Danica, you inspire me every single day." The crowd applauded softly. I reached for her hand, squeezing it. "Thank you, Sav. That sees in tortures, man the rabber. And problem marn, and problem in batter." For the first time, she squeezed back without words, just understanding. Later, I sat at one of the tables, watching the children chase fireflies while the grown-ups danced. The soft notes of the piano played in the background, Laya and James performing their surprise song. When the melody shifted into canon in D, something in my chest tightened. That was the song that used to play in the hospital's maternity ward when a baby was born. I'd heard it hundreds of times on shift. But tonight, it felt personal, a new beginning. As the night deepened, David found me at the edge of the dance floor. "Mrs. Whitman, he said with a grin. I laughed. Still getting used to that. He extended a hand. Dance with me? We swayed under the fairy lights, the world fading around us. I'm still amazed we got here. He whispered. Me too. He chuckled softly. You know, when Ethan first told me about you, he said, she's the strongest person I know. I smiled. He might have been exaggerating. David shook his head. No. He was right. We stood there for a while. Silent except for the music and the sound of crickets. Then, softly, he said, you turned every heartbreak into something beautiful. That's your superpower. Tears welled in my eyes. And you turned that beauty into home. They have for what you never rater rinny to matter. They have matted for pitting of the Kermans. He kissed my forehead. Then we make a good team. At the end of the night, Laya climbed onto my lap. Sleepy and warm. Her curls tangled with flower petals. Was this the best forever day ever? She mumbled. The best. I whispered. She smiled. Can we do it again tomorrow? I laughed quietly. Not exactly like this, sweetheart. But we'll have lots of forever days, okay? Promise? Promise. David wrapped an arm around both of us, as the last of the guests began to leave. The fairy lights shimmered. The air smelled like roses and the faint sweetness of cake. And for once, for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't thinking about what came next. I was just here, present, whole. And that was enough. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains, and Laya's laughter drifting from the kitchen. David was making pancakes, badly. There was batter on his shirt, smoke rising from the pan, and 2 very uneven stacks on a plate. Perfect, I teased. He grinned. I call it rustic. Laya held up her plate proudly. He let me stir. Well, that explains everything, I said, laughing. David leaned in to kiss me. Welcome home, Mrs. Whitman. And they should weigh the componated. Weigh the componated do and nide. And just like that, the woman who once stood on the sidelines of her own life finally stepped into the center of it. Not as someone's disappointment, not as someone's rescue project, but as herself, loved, respected, and free. 6 months after the wedding, life had found a rhythm. The kind of rhythm that hums quietly through ordinary mornings, the clatter of coffee mugs, the sound of Laya's piano drifting through the hall, and David whistling off key as he packed James's lunch for school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And for the first time, real was enough. I'd officially started the leadership fellowship that came with the hospital scholarship. My days were long board meetings, mentorship sessions, late-night paperwork, but every challenge carried a sense of meaning. Mom, Laya said one morning, sitting cross-legged at the table, pencil in hand. What's advocacy mean? I smiled. It means speaking up for people who can't. Her little brow furrowed. Like you do for the other nurses? Exactly, I said. Or like when you told your teacher your friend didn't get a turn on the swing. She grinned proudly. Then I'm an advocate too. Yes, baby, you are. She returned to her coloring with the quiet focus of someone who already understood more about courage than most adults. The months that followed felt like a new season in my life, one of peace, yes, but also purpose. At the hospital, I began mentoring younger nurses. We'd meet in the cafeteria after shift change, tired but determined, trading stories over cheap coffee. One night, a new nurse named Camille sighed and said, "Sometimes I think about quitting. The hours, the pressure, it feels impossible." I nodded. It's not easy. But the hardest nights are the ones that teach you who you are. You don't have to be perfect, just present. She smiled weakly. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Right, see, wait. Too well and too way. And I realized every word I said to her was something I once needed to hear myself. Maybe that's what healing really is, using your pain as a map so others don't get lost. At home, Savannah's world was changing too. One evening, she called, her voice trembling. They matched us with a baby girl, Danica. My breath caught. Sav. That's amazing. Her laugh cracked mid-sob. I can't stop crying. After everything. She's really coming home. A week later, I drove with her and Ethan to the adoption center. When the counselor brought out a tiny bundle wrapped in a yellow blanket, Savannah's knees buckled. Ethan caught her, tears streaming down his own face. Hi there, little one, he whispered. Savannah turned to me, voice breaking. Her name's Grace. I smiled through my tears. It suits her. In that moment, the woman who once mocked me now held Grace literally and figuratively in her arms. And somehow, that felt like the universe's quiet poetry. Months passed, and life kept expanding in quiet, unexpected ways. Mom started volunteering at the community center where I ran Second Sunrise. She brought snacks and insisted on hugging every woman who showed up. Dad fixed the center's leaky plumbing 3 times just because it was about time someone took care of the place. The circle kept widening. What had started as one mother's survival story was slowly turning into a community's blueprint for resilience. Then came the call. It was a Thursday evening in March. I was in my office finishing up reports when my phone buzzed. "Mrs. Whitman?" A man's voice said. "This is Detective Reed from the City Police Department. We have a situation involving one of your nurses." My pulse quickened. "What kind of situation?" "It's about Rachel Turner." He was not of this. There is no save of the cruise. They met a great tomorrow post for many side. "Rachel, my colleague, my friend, the single mother I'd helped months ago. She's safe," he added quickly. "But her son? There's been an accident. He's in critical condition." The world tilted. I grabbed my coat and ran. By the time I reached the hospital, Rachel was standing in the hallway outside the ICU, pale and shaking. "Danica," she sobbed, collapsing into my arms. "He ran into the street after our dog." I looked away for 2 seconds. I held her tightly. "It's not your fault. He's in good hands now." The doctors worked tirelessly, but hours passed before anyone came out. Finally, Dr. Harris emerged, pulling down his mask. "We stabilized him. The next 24 hours are critical, but he's a fighter." Rachel sank into a chair, sobbing in relief. I stayed with her all night, fetching coffee, fielding updates, holding her hand when the silence got too heavy. By dawn, she looked at me and whispered, "How do you stay strong like this?" I smiled softly. "You don't stay strong. You just don't give up." That day reminded me why I'd chosen this path, not just nursing, but leadership, advocacy, humanity. We can't always fix the pain, but we can stand beside people while they face it. When I got home that morning, I found David and Laya still in their pajamas, waiting for me at the kitchen table. "Rough night?" David asked gently. I nodded. "Rachel's son is stable now. It'll be a long road." Laya reached out and took my hand. "You helped again, Mommy." I smiled faintly. "We all help in our own ways, sweetheart." David squeezed my shoulder. "You don't realize it, but what you do, it changes lives. Not just at work." I met his gaze and saw it, the quiet certainty. The kind that anchors you when everything else feels like shifting sand. That weekend, we drove to the park to clear our heads. Laya and James ran ahead, racing across the grass while David and I walked slowly behind them. "Do you ever think about slowing down?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said. "But every time I do, someone needs help. And I remember what it felt like to have no one." He nodded. "You're building something bigger than you realize." I smiled. "Maybe. But it's not about being seen anymore. It's about showing up." A few weeks later, Rachel's son woke up. His recovery was slow, but steady. One night, she stopped by my office with a small gift bag. Inside was a bracelet made from simple beads. "It's not much," she said. "But I made it to remind you that you don't just lead, you lift." I looked down at the bracelet, tracing the word spelled in tiny silver letters. Hope. It shimmered in the light like something sacred. That night, as I tucked Laya into bed, she asked, "What's hope, Mommy?" I thought for a moment. "It's what keeps us moving forward," I said. "Even when we're scared." She nodded sleepily. "Like when I was afraid to go on stage but did it anyway." "Exactly." She smiled. "Then you're the bravest person I know." Tears stung my eyes. "No, baby. That's you." It's close another. Later, when the house was quiet, I stood in the garden again. The herbs had grown wild, the tomato plant now heavy with fruit. I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist and looked up at the stars. There was peace here. But not the kind that meant stillness. It was the peace that comes from knowing your life means something to others, to yourself, to the world. I wasn't chasing validation anymore. I was building legacy. And as the wind moved softly through the trees, I whispered to the night, "I'm not done yet." 10 years later, the house still smelled faintly of rosemary and lemon, the scent of every Sunday morning in our home. Outside, the garden had grown into something wild and full. The herbs I once planted in chipped pots now stretched into raised beds, tangled with lavender, mint, and tiny bursts of yellow sunflowers that Laya insisted on growing, for joy. Inside, the sound of piano music floated through the air, no longer the clumsy notes of a little girl, but the confident, fluid melody of a young woman who had found her rhythm. "Mom?" Laya called from the living room. "Can you hear this?" I smiled, setting my tea aside. "I can, sweetheart. It's beautiful." She played a few more bars, her fingers graceful and sure. Then she looked up, eyes shining. "I got the scholarship," she said breathlessly. "The one for the conservatory in Boston." For a moment, the world went still. Then I crossed the room in 3 long steps and pulled her into my arms. "You did it," I whispered. "Oh, Laya, you did it." She laughed, half crying. "You always said music was my way of talking to the world. Now I get to really do it." "Yes," I said softly. "You get to tell your story in your own way." That night, After the celebration dinner, and after David and James had cleaned up the kitchen, despite burning the garlic bread beyond recognition, I stepped outside. The air was cool, the stars familiar. I sat on the porch swing, feeling the quiet settle around me. 10 years. 10 years since the night at that restaurant when the laughter that once crushed me became the catalyst for everything that followed. 10 years since I realized that the world's opinion of me didn't define who I was. Back then, I thought I needed vindication proof that I wasn't a failure. But what I really needed was space to become the woman I was meant to be. And somewhere along the way, that space became a life. Laya joined me outside, her hair still damp from the shower, her sweatshirt too big for her shoulders. "Are you crying?" she asked softly. "Just a little," I admitted. "It's a happy kind of crying," she smiled. "You always cry when something's beautiful." "Maybe," I said, wrapping an arm around her. "Maybe that's how I know it's real." She rested her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever miss the old days? Before all this?" I thought for a long moment. "I miss the woman who fought through them," I said finally. She was scared, but she kept going. "I owe her everything." Laya nodded quietly. "I think she'd be proud of you." I laughed softly. "I hope so." At the hospital, my world had changed too. Director Torres. People now said when they knocked on my office door, a title that still made me smile every time. The first policy I'd ever written, the one to protect working parents, was now statewide standard. And the second Sunrise Initiative had expanded across 3 counties, run entirely by volunteers who once sat in that first circle of folding chairs with me years ago. When I visited the community center, I'd see women helping one another fill out college applications, rewrite resumes, or find safe housing. Each of them carried a story not of pity, but of power. And every time I looked at them, I thought, this is what hope looks like when it grows up. One day, after a hospital conference, a young nurse approached me. "Director Torres?" she said nervously. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "How do you do it? All of it? The career, the family, the grace?" I smiled. "Badly sometimes," I said, and she laughed. "But the truth is, I stopped trying to do it all perfectly. I just try to do it honestly." She nodded, her shoulders relaxing. I really needed to hear that. I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Then promise me one thing when someone else needs to hear it. You'll tell them too." That evening, I found an old box buried in the closet, a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were remnants of an old life. My first nursing badge, Laya's kindergarten drawings, and a folded newspaper clipping from the hospital newsletter. "Single Mothers Program Sparks Statewide Reform." I traced the headline with my thumb, remembering how terrified I'd been to speak publicly back then. Next to it was a photo from our wedding, Laya and James laughing as flower petals fell around us. Savannah was standing beside me, holding baby Grace. She and Ethan now ran a children's health foundation, inspired by their adoption journey. Grace was 8, curious, brilliant, and already playing piano with Laya whenever they visited. The past hadn't vanished. It had simply softened. And that, I realized, was its own kind of redemption. Later that week, I spoke at a leadership summit for women in healthcare. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, some weary, some hopeful, all searching, I took a breath. "When I was younger," I began, "I thought success was about proving people wrong, but it's not. It's about proving to yourself that you can keep showing up, even when no one claps." I paused, letting the words settle. Years ago, I was told I'd never make it, that being a single mother meant my dreams were over. But here's the truth. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the soil that grows it. "Seize a ready one" was. The audience was silent. I smiled. So to every woman out there fighting through her hardest season, don't wait for the world to validate you. Build your own worth, brick by brick. You're already enough. When the applause came, it was thunderous. But I didn't stand there for the recognition. I stood there because I knew what it felt like to sit in the back of a room believing you'd never belong in it. And now, I wanted every woman in that room to know she did. That night, as I returned home, the house was quiet. David was reading in the living room, glasses sliding down his nose. He looked up and smiled. "How was the summit?" "It is not deceit instrect. It is not de self-ding de safar." "Powerful," I said softly. "But I think it was more healing for me than anyone else." He set his book down and took my hand. "You've spent your life healing others, Danica. It's about time you realized how much you've healed yourself." I leaned against him, closing my eyes, listening to the faint hum of the night outside. He was right. I had healed. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough to stand in the light without flinching. A few months later, Laya left for Boston. We drove her to the airport, hearts full and aching. As she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "I'll make you proud, Mommy." I smiled through tears. You already have. There's 7 when we are due in for the sare. Watching her disappear through the terminal doors, I felt a wave of gratitude for every sleepless night, every doubt, every hard choice that had led to this. She was my beginning, and now she was her own. That evening, I returned to the garden one more time. The sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and rose, the same colors as that first night I decided I wouldn't let anyone else define me. The wind carried the scent of mint and earth. Somewhere in the distance a child laughed. And I realized, life doesn't circle back to where it started. It builds forward, carrying every version of who you've been, until one day you can look around and see that you've turned survival into something sacred. I picked a sprig of rosemary, pressed it between my palms, and whispered to the night, for every woman who's ever been told she's not enough, may she one day stand in her own garden and know that she always was. The world was quiet, but I could almost hear the universe whisper back, yes.